All right, hello, and thank you everyone for joining the SIG Network meeting for March 30th, 2023. Just a reminder to everybody that this meeting is covered by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which boils down to please be nice to one another. We got a little bit of a late start. Sorry about that. There is some configuration problems with Zoom that I have to figure out for next time. The agenda is fairly light, so if you're coming in and you do have anything else that you wanted to add, please do feel free to jump on the agenda doc, which I'll link in the chat, and add something to talk about. But otherwise, we might end up with a fairly short meeting today, which works with the late start.
We can do issue triage, right?
Yep. All right. So I'll share my screen here. See the agenda doc?
I mean, I'm up to do issue triage or just going directly to the issue. I mean, to the agenda. Right?
Hang on, I'm turning my volume up. I can't hear you too great, Antonio. What do you want to do?
That whatever the people want to do, but
I was going to go through it as it's stated on the board, unless somebody has an alternative.
Well, right, but do we want to start with the usual bit of issue triage? And if so, do we have anyone to? Okay.
Do we have enough people here to really do it effectively? I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Let's take a look. I assume you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
All right. I'll assume that the ones assigned to Tim we don't necessarily have to deal with right now, if nothing else, because he's not here to talk about them. I can talk a little bit about this one, and then we'll go over these other two. So this one is just kind of underway. We have a gateway API effort going on right now, which let me make sure it's actually over here. So this is potentially a duplicate of this one, service backup selector, which we've decided we don't really want to do. And so there's an effort going on in gateway API right now in this issue to basically add something like that, but in the gateway API, at the gateway API level instead of the service level, so that we theoretically don't have to update the service to do it. So they're looking for some kind of a backup selector, some kind of like a failover in service, which we don't really want to add. And we're just giving them some time to kind of let us know, like there's some open questions which have been around long enough that I'll probably start closing these out soon and be like, all right, well, we haven't really heard back from you. Reopen if you want to. But we kind of have a way to go forward with this with Gateway API. If that works for you, let us know.
Wait, that was the backup selector one, right?
Yep.
Right. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Their rationale for a backup selector was that if all endpoints in their primary service were unavailable, you would fall back or fail over to whatever is in your backup selector, which is basically just a different service.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that feels like I would rather not add a selector. Yeah, okay. So gateway.
Yeah, but how that solves the problem that they explained?
How would gateway API solve it?
No, that's adding a selector. How does solve the problem? Because they say when everything goes nuts, nothing works. Just keep sending traffic to a percentage, if I remember correctly.
I think the insinuation that we had last time we talked about this one is that we're not sure. We're not getting a whole lot of feedback from them. It's a very old issue. So I think the insinuation is that it might not actually solve the problem that they were originally trying to solve, but in lieu of getting feedback from them, and because we have another reason to do something similar, like this was a completely separate person doing this for a different reason, this might be a reasonable cause to just close the issue and say follow up there, or let us know if you really still need this in the.
But, as specified in the show before, isn't that recursive? You try another service, it has a backup, and sort of just fall down.
Yeah, fallback.
Yeah, you fall back, and
Not sure if
Yeah,
I
and
understood the question.
No, it's like if you point to a service, do you point to another service or you point to the pods that the other service use? If you point to the service and it has a fallback as well, will you then start sort of walking down a
Oh, I see.
trail of
You're wondering if
fallbacks?
we're solving for like whether or not we're going back to the specific pods and falling back to them. Let me read back over this one.
I think if it's in Gateway
Service level
API,
at this, yeah.
So I think like
But-
this is a valid use case I put in the chat, but trying to stick it onto service API is probably like not a great idea.
Yeah, we're going to invite them to kind of come help us understand their use case at the gateway level. Hopefully that level will work for them, because I think everybody on this call, I haven't heard anybody disagree. We don't really want to jam this into service.
Yeah.
But this is the panic threshold thing.
Sorry,
So
you
the
went
first-
robot for a second.
Okay. So the first
Sorry.
one that you open is the panic threshold.
Yeah, they wanted something that we talked about at a previous meeting as being vaguely similar. And so we've left the open question of, is this similar enough? Does the service backup selector / the gateway API interpretation of that work for you? And they have not responded yet. But there was kind of, it wasn't exactly what they said they wanted, but this is what we were asking them. Is this actually kind of what you want? Does service backup selector do this for you? But what they said they wanted was, removing like bad upstream services.
What?
But this one's fairly confusing if I remember correctly. Let me go back over it here.
Yeah, this makes it sound like they want to remove the pods that are consistently failing health checks, which feels like it could be a circular. I don't know how that would go.
Yeah, it could be,
or maybe misunderstanding.
Messy. But then hang on, let me see if I can catch back up with myself. So we talked about it. Yeah, okay. So last month we talked about it here, and I think it was Tim that suggested, Tim suggested something here. Should we call this a dupe of service backup selector? Yeah, and we talked about it. I grabbed it and I basically expanded on Tim's question as per our last talk. It's like, is what you're trying to do better covered by having fallbacks? And if so, can we consider this a duplicate? Because what they're ultimately sounded like they were kind of trying to do was just make sure that they have some sort of fallback position when things go wrong with some of their upstreams, but we weren't really sure. And we haven't heard back from them, so I'm probably just going to end up kind of politely closing this one and asking them to reopen if they come back.
Yeah.
Any further questions about that, or can we jump to the next one? The next one was, have I seen this one? Kube proxy IPVS mode, traffic sent from pods to external load balancer, not directed to the respective cluster IP instead. Is Lars here? No. Okay. So let's see where we ended up on this one, or if somebody wants to jump in. Okay, it looks like Lars had suggested we could close this based on this. Okay. And then they came back with IP tables has the fix, but IPVS does not. Okay. I can follow up with Lars separately or follow up on this one, but it sounds like if this is true, then maybe we need to act this, and maybe there is something more to do here. So I'll bookmark that one real quick. If nobody else has anything to say about that one, I will just intend to follow up on it async and keep it going forward. And then this one, which nobody's seen yet or grabbed yet, if it is not applicable for external IP point to have a value, then kubectl get services should display NA instead of none. All right. Anybody responded to this at all? Antonio, you and Lars have both kind of checked it out. Antonio, do you have anything to say about this one? I mean, it seems like it's somebody wants a different display than what we've traditionally had, which I'm not sure that if I understand their reasoning just yet. Let me go back and check this.
I think Antonio is fighting with his headset. You there, Antonio? Yeah. You're reconnected.
Okay, so external IP is none when there is no load balancer. If it's not applicable. So he's saying there is a load balancer, it should say NA because none means no load balancer based on the tutorial information. Go ahead, Antonio.
Okay, so
I can hear you.
I'm talking on mute. Continue. That I don't know. I mean, it's these things is. I think that you can justify whatever whatever thing that you want. It's about work. But for me and for Lars, it's okay the way that it is.
Okay. So it sounds like he's kind of got a point, and it seems like there would be one of two ways to solve that point. Potentially changing the documentation or actually changing the value.
But anything is in 6 CLI. If
Yeah,
they want
but
to
it is,
change that.
it's not really ours. So maybe what we should do is just kind of grab somebody specific from SIG CLI and just say, hey, what do you think about this? I'll take it and kind of move it forward. Doesn't seem like we need to spend a whole lot of time on that here. All right. All right, so that covers triage for today. I think we did a KEP review last time, but we could do a KEP review today too. "25 minutes, yeah. So we could just take a look real quick. Is it actually, it probably, since we did a KEP review last time, and I don't think much has changed, is there anything anybody wants to highlight in terms of SIG network KEPs today? Any attention you want to draw to something or shout outs that you want to do?
I would like to point to mine, but it's not part of like release, so I'm not sure that applies.
Okay.
The one that I pointed out in mine, I just want to kind of make a shout out if someone could take a look, review. And it's the KEP is a bit unusual because it's not a design per se, it's just like a requirements for the multi-networking stuff. So it's a should be lighter read, but still I would like to have that merged as a kind of hard definition of what we want to do with multi-networking.
Okay.
So
what's the number for that one again?
It's in the link in your minutes. Yeah, the last
Cool.
one. That's the pull request.
You broke the link.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. I'm copy pasted. Okay. So yeah, this one needs a little bit more attention. It's had a lot.
Yeah, I had some set of reviews from Dan already. I tried to address those and some other folks. So I think most of them kind of addressed. But yeah, I would like to some other folks to kind of take a look and I would like to love this merged if possible. And this is a bit unusual, so I'm not sure how to treat this, right? It's, as I mentioned, this is not a design, it's just a requirements list. I know the KEPs usually are proper design, so it's an odd one. So not sure if community says it should be a just straightforward design, then yeah, we will put it somewhere else. But I'm not sure how to handle this. So there's that.
Roger that. Well, I put myself.
I think
as a
this one
CC
makes
on there,
sense.
so
You
I'll
just
take a
don't need
look.
to do production review.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I didn't even push this one for like I didn't bother anyone with this one for the release and the code freeze last few weeks back. Just I'm coming back now when I hope this is a bit lighter time when everything is almost on the release and there is no much of others priority stuff. So this is where I'm trying to kind of chip in, and if someone could take a look at this.
Okay, I'll take a look at it if nothing else.
Thank you.
And yep.
Can you leave a
Maciek,
comment?
so historically, like we've reached out to, I know Rob has been very good at this in terms of like people on Slack in Signet to kind of review it who haven't seen it. Rob, like, what do you advise to sort of get enough consensus?
Yeah, it looks like you've got a lot of people already reviewing this, which is great. There's a subset, and like if you look at somewhere down here, there's going to be a set of owners that can actually approve this. If it's helpful when you finally get to the list of approvers that you already have some LGTMs on this, or people that are largely.
Yeah, I don't have I have non LGTM, so that's why
okay.
Yeah, that's my problem.
So yeah, maybe it's helpful just to follow up with some of the people that have reviewed the most and see if they're now okay with it, and if you can get some LGTMs from them, then.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah.
I haven't. Yeah, let me try that. I do have. Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Were there any other KEPs that anybody wanted to raise today, rather than going over the whole board here?
I think with the current state of the release cycle, I probably aren't many KEPs in flight.
Everything's kind of, everything's a little glacial at the moment. All right, take it away, Antonio. Service spec load balancer IP deprecation.
Yeah, after the discussion in the linked issue, so the history is that for dual stack, we decided to not pluralize load balancer IP because it was complex to understand, and well, this is the whole discussion linked. And then the release note indicated that the field was going to be deprecated and better use an annotation and maybe removed. So 2 weeks ago in the cloud provider DCP repo, someone wants to add an annotation to use instead of this field. And I'm trying to explain then, and there's a company behind that depends on this too, that the node says deprecation and maybe remove, but it can never be remove a field from an GA object. So that field is always going to be there. Just to demonstrate that this is a high consensus in SIG network that field is not going to be removed from the service.spec.load balancer IP. I just want to expose it here to assert if I'm right or there are some concerns and people should start doing annotations and not using the field anymore. Yeah, basically, you cannot remove a field from a GA API because that will break compatibility, and that's forbidden by the policy.
Seems pretty cut and dry to me. I don't know if anybody else has any comments. That seems very straightforward to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Cool. So what do you need? Do you need somebody to like come in there and kind of back that up with you? Do you want somebody
No,
to?
I told them, I mean, I'm going to make this more public, discuss with SIG Network, so you can see that, you know, the whole community agrees that this field cannot be removed. And
Roger that.
it cannot be removed because it will be incompatible. In
Yep.
a Kubernetes 2.0 thing, it can be removed, but then you need to add a new service. And then, you know, I mean, that's not going to happen.
Roger that. I subscribe to it, so I'll keep an eye on, see what they say after what you said. Okay. In that case, we may be at the end of our agenda. And it would be fine for, especially with 25 minutes left, if anybody had any last minute topics that they wanted to pipe up with. We'll give a couple seconds for that. Otherwise, we can close early today.
Antonio, do you want to bring up the cider stuff that we talked about, I think yesterday or the day before? Just a hint for everybody that this is coming their way.
Yeah, I can talk if you are interested. I don't have anything, and I didn't have time to think about, but I can expose the problem, and if you are interested, if not,
go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So you know that I've been working in the service side thing. So you can use an API to create more service siders and modify that option that right now is a flagged API server. There is another cap that does the same for the cluster side. So instead of using the flags in the controller manager, you create this cluster side. And discussing about that with Carl, we found, okay, what happens if people start to create overlapping subnets, right? You can exclude your cluster. If you assign service siders that are in the pod sider or the other way around, you're going to have a mess. So how can we make this easier to consume for users? Because what we want is, we should not ask people to configure their networking flags, because if they use the flags to configure the cluster, then you need to be super exact and predict exactly all the IPs that you need, or you end wasting space, or you end in a situation that you need to create or recreate the cluster. And okay, so the conclusion is that having two APIs, service sider and cluster sider, with current API machinery is impossible to reconcile, and unless you have the status and use a central controller that verify two APIs and then set the status of one or the other, but this still can be racy, right? Because those are different objects and handle different things. So what Carl says is, well, everything will be easier if everything was in the same object. So he is suggesting this singleton pattern, like a configuration object that you define service siders and pod siders. And this is when, I think that is when we left the discussion. Carl, I don't know if you want to add something else.
So I think the most important point is, at some point in the near future, everybody will get a doc, right? It should be a short doc that describes the current situation, the proposed solution, right? And where we think we want to take this. When we had this discussion, and everybody was like, okay, we have these resources that are shared, such as cluster sider, service sider, node ports, DNS config, and all of that stuff that are used all over. And we identified like the user personas into cluster providers. Those are like the people who stand up clusters, be it cloud or stuff like kubeadmin. And what we want from you is, once you get the document, please look at it, comment on it, right? Because this is where we think will drive this part in the future, right? So comments, questions, poking, and everything that we do will be highly appreciated.
Sounds like a plan.
That's a good question for service, for gateway API, because we talk about the things that we are more familiar, the pod and the service. For gateway API, do you have any specific dependency on the cluster configuration besides services? Well, we identified these 4 points: node port, service side, DNS config, and pod side. But
Do you want to go ahead, Rob? Looks like you unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any, gateway API is going to bring your own implementation. At this point, I can't think of much in the way of dependencies other than.
Yeah, we're really loosely tied to that stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
there's no. I can't think of an explicit tie to any of those things. It's all kind of loosely bound.
there is so it's on the peripheral of what we're trying to do. It's not directly tied to it. Is the idea of all port service. The idea is you have currently it's really hard to run NVAs on Kubernetes, network virtual appliance. You can, but you do a lot of tricks that you shouldn't be doing. So there is this idea of all port services that has been discussed, and there is even a cap for it that didn't really move forward, and the person that was pushing it forward is no longer pushing it. So part of trying to do all of that is to figure out if we can make a stepping stone where those peripheral components can sit on top of something like that. So this is early thinking, right? And it has implication on the Alpha API that currently Antonio has out. So again, all we're asking you to do right now is just to read the doc, comment, ask questions, and we want to make sure that we covered all the ends with this because it's going to be a serious investment in terms of effort, right? It's not going to look like a major change from the outside, but internally it will be. Right? So that's something also everybody needs to keep an eye on. Soon, hopefully the doc will be out.
Okay.
Oh, you'll be sharing it. You'll be sharing it shortly. I think it sounds like Antonio. He's signing you up to.
Yeah,
rush.
No,
that's why
we
I'm saying.
sacrificed them
Okay,
to the gods.
Soon we have QCon. I have vacation. Soon is weeks. And I want to set
soon is relative. Tim, thankfully, he's like, okay, once we have the doc, we should be able to have that data structure because that structure is gonna be interesting to come up with. So he jumped on it and he's like, yeah, we should look at that structure deeply and so on. Again, nothing happened. It's just an idea. We want to make sure that it's valid, it's sound, and it fits with all the peripherals around it. So yeah, soon. Soon you should have the doc. All right, soonish. That's it. Thank you. Shane, we yield the floor to you.
No, we cannot hear you, Shane.
Sorry.
Mute or
Cheers, everybody. Have a good one. We have one more meeting before KubeCon in a couple weeks here.
Oh. Okay. Well.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.